A cardboard box shouldn't have been there. Amidst the storm screaming in off the Oregon coast, on a pitch-black highway, it was just a dark shape on the shoulder of the road. At first, I wrote it off as trash, something that had fallen from a truck. I drove right past it. I tried to ignore it, tried to keep my world small and separate the way I always do. But the image of that lone box, collapsing under the lashing rain, wouldn't leave my mind. There was this pull I couldn't explain, a feeling that something was deeply wrong. I turned the truck around, tires hissing on the wet pavement. I knelt beside it, the cold rain soaking instantly through my jeans. It was just a heap of soaked cardboard, but inside, there was a dark piece of cloth. The moment I reached in, the moment I pulled it back, I froze. Because underneath wasn't trash, it was fur. A set of limp ears, and a pair of eyes sealed shut. My name is Cole. I'm 42, and what I used to be, a Navy man, feels like a lifetime ago. Now, I just try to keep to myself here in this quiet corner of Oregon, where the rain can wash away most things, but never the memories. I was driving home in my old truck, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm that had rolled in off the Pacific. The rain came down in sheets, turning the world outside my windshield into a black, blurry mess. It was the kind of night that felt heavy, the kind that pressed down on your shoulders and reminded you how alone you really were. That's when I saw it. A dark shape on the shoulder of the road, a cardboard box that was sagging and collapsing under the weight of the downpour. My first thought was that it was just trash, another piece of junk somebody couldn't be bothered to take to the dump. I should have kept driving. My whole life was structured around not getting involved, not looking too closely at the world's messes. But something made my foot press the brake. Maybe it was the way it sat there, so small and defeated against the raging storm. I pulled over, the truck's engine rumbling like a low growl. For a moment, I just sat there, watching the rain hammer down on the box. It was insane to get out. But the soldier in me, the part I thought I'd buried long ago, wouldn't let it go. With a sigh that turned into a cloud in the cold air, I pushed open my door and stepped into the deluge. The water soaked through my jeans in seconds. As I got closer, I could see the box was disintegrating. One side had already given way. I knelt, my knees sinking into the muddy gravel, and peered inside. At first, all I saw was a dirty, soaked rag. Then, the rag moved. A tiny, shivering tremor. I reached in and pulled the cloth away. Curled into a tight ball was a German Shepherd puppy, no more than a few months old. His black and tan fur was matted flat against his tiny body, and he was so cold his shivering was almost imperceptible. He was dying. Tucked beside him, soaked but still readable, was a scrap of paper with one word scrawled in black ink: useless. The word hit me harder than the wind. Useless. Discarded. Left to be washed away like nothing. I felt a familiar rage, cold and sharp, rise in my chest. It was the same helpless anger I'd felt 1,000 times in deserts far from here. But this was different. This wasn't an enemy or a war. This was just cruelty, plain and simple. All my reasons for staying distant, for keeping my head down, vanished in that single moment. The hesitation was gone, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I gently scooped the puppy into my hands. He weighed almost nothing, a fragile collection of cold bones and wet fur. He let out a whimper so faint it was more a breath of air than a sound. He was still fighting. Cradling him against my chest inside my leather jacket, I ran back to the truck. I cranked the heat up as high as it would go and started driving, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. There was only one vet clinic in town, and I prayed Dr. Evans was still there. As the tiny body trembled against my ribs, I found myself whispering to him, or maybe to myself, "Hang on. Just hang on. I got you." The storm raged on outside, but inside the sterile quiet of the clinic, the world had shrunk to the size of a small steel table. Dr. Evans, a woman with tired but kind eyes, had managed to stabilize him. She told me he was severely dehydrated and malnourished, his body temperature dangerously low. It was a miracle he was still alive. She said I could go home, that they would watch him through the night. But I couldn't leave. The thought of returning to my empty house, to the silence that was usually a comfort, but now felt like an accusation, was unbearable. "I'll stay," I said, my voice hoarse. She nodded, understanding more than I said. I pulled a chair close to his kennel, and Saturday, he looked so small against the clean white towels. I needed to give him a name. Not a number, not a case file. A name that had strength. Maverick, I whispered into the quiet room. Because he was a fighter, an independent soul who refused to give up, even when the world had thrown him away. He was a maverick. And in that moment I realized I was one too. The next few days blurred into a routine of quiet vigilance. Anna, the young vet tech, showed me how to gently clean his matted fur with a warm, damp cloth, how to mix a special broth and coax tiny drops into his mouth with a syringe. These simple tasks demanded a focus I hadn't known I still possessed. My hands, which had once handled weapons with cold efficiency, learned a new kind of gentleness. Every small sign of progress felt like a monumental victory. The first time he lifted his head, his ears still flopped over. The first time his eyes, no longer cloudy with pain, followed me as I moved around the room. I wasn't just taking care of him. I was anchoring myself to the present, to this one small, meaningful mission. The ghosts of the past, the echoes of sand and shouting, grew quieter with every soft cloth stroke, with every drop of broth he managed to swallow. This tiny broken creature was giving me something to fight for again, something other than my own demons. The nights were the hardest. Sleep for me was never a peaceful country. It was a minefield of memories. I'd doze off in the uncomfortable plastic chair, my head against the cool wall, and the dreams would come. The rumble of an engine, the heat, the confusion. But just as the familiar panic would start to grip me, a small sound from the kennel would pull me back. A soft whimper, the rustle of a blanket, the rhythmic, steady sound of his breathing. I would open my eyes, my heart pounding, and see Maverick watching me through the bars. His presence was a lighthouse in my storm-tossed mind, a quiet signal reminding me where I was. Here, safe. Not there, not then. Slowly, night by night, the darkness began to recede. His healing was becoming mine. On the fourth day, something changed. I was sitting on the floor beside his kennel, my hand resting near the door, when he stirred. He pushed himself up on wobbly legs, his body still fragile, but with a new determination. He took a hesitant step, then another. He walked right up to the kennel door, pushed his wet nose through the bars, and rested his head against the back of my hand. He didn't lick it, he just rested it there. A deliberate, silent gesture. It wasn't a plea for food or a cry of pain. It was trust. A simple, profound offering from one broken soul to another. In that silent moment, with the weight of his small head against my skin, I felt a crack in the wall I had built around my heart. He was telling me I wasn't a ghost, and I was telling him he wasn't useless. We were just two survivors, finding our way back in the quiet, shared space of healing. The weeks that followed were filled with a kind of light I had forgotten existed. Maverick was no longer the shivering, broken thing I had pulled from a cardboard box. He was a force of nature. His black and tan coat grew in thick and glossy, his legs became strong, and his ears, once permanently flopped, now stood at attention, catching every sound with sharp curiosity. We developed a routine of taking short walks in the clinic's small backlot, and he would chase a frayed rope toy with a ferocious joy that made me laugh out loud. The sound of my own laughter felt foreign, like an echo from another man's life. He was healing on the outside, and his energy was forcing me to heal on the inside. He was ready, I knew it. But I wasn't prepared for the day Anna approached me, a hopeful but cautious look on her face. "Cole," she said softly. "He's officially ready for his forever home. We've had some interest. A family is coming to meet him this afternoon. The words hit me like a physical blow. Forever home. The phrase mocked me. I had foolishly started to believe that his home was with me. They arrived at 2 o'clock. A man and a woman, with kind, gentle faces, and their young son, who looked to be about 10, the Millers. They were, in a word, perfect. They had a large house just outside of town with a fenced yard that backed onto the woods. The boy, named Sam, knelt down slowly, not reaching out, just letting Maverick come to him. Maverick, who was usually cautious with strangers, seemed to sense their warmth. He trotted over, sniffed the boy's outstretched hand, and then gave it a single, soft lick. Mrs. Miller's eyes welled up. "He's beautiful," she whispered. I stood by the door, my hands shoved deep in my pockets, feeling like an intruder in my own life. I watched them play with him, saw the genuine joy on their faces and the happy, energetic response from Maverick. A voice in my head, the cold, logical one that had kept me alive in the field, started its relentless assault. This is what's best for him. They can give him everything you can't. A real family. Space. Stability. What do you have to offer? An empty house and a head full of ghosts. Keeping him would be selfish. Every moment they spent with him was a fresh torment. I saw Maverick chasing a ball thrown by the boy, his body a blur of joyful motion, and my heart ached with a profound sense of loss that felt all too familiar. I've known loss. I've watched friends leave and not come back. I learned to build walls to survive it, to not get attached. But this little dog had tunneled under every defense I had. The thought of walking out of this clinic without him, of returning to the crushing silence of my house, was suffocating. I would be letting him go, willingly sending away the one living thing that made the nightmares recede, the one being that looked at me and didn't see a broken soldier, but just a man. The logical voice screamed that it was the right thing to do, the right thing for the dog, but my heart was screaming back, a raw primal sound of pure terror, "Don't leave me!" They were getting ready to go, talking with Anna about the final paperwork. Mrs. Miller turned to me, her smile radiant. "Thank you for saving him," she said. "You gave him a chance to have a life with us." I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. I looked over at Maverick. He had stopped playing and was sitting by the boy's feet, but his eyes were on me. He wasn't looking at the family, or the ball, or Anna. He was looking straight at me, a steady, unwavering gaze. In that look, I didn't see a dog who was ready for a new, better life. I saw my friend, my anchor. I saw a fellow survivor who had found his person, and in that instant, the war inside me ended. The logical voice fell silent. I finally understood. Home isn't a big yard or a perfect family. Home is where you are not alone. It's a connection. He was already home. I had won the battle. Not against the family, but against the ghost in my own head that told me I wasn't worthy of being saved, too. I walked back into the clinic, the sound of the Miller's car fading down the road. Maverick trotted beside me, his new rope toy still in his mouth. He sat at my feet and looked up, as if waiting for the next command. Anna was behind the counter, pretending to be busy with some files, but I saw the small, knowing smile on her face. I walked up to the counter and placed my hands flat on its surface. "I'm keeping him," I said. It wasn't a question or a request. It was a statement of fact. She looked up, her smile widening. "I already filled out the paperwork, Cole. I just needed you to sign it." She pushed the form across the counter. I picked up the pen, and as I wrote my name on the line next to adopter, I felt a sense of finality, of rightness, that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just signing a form. I was signing a treaty with life again. I was choosing to stay, for him, for me. The drive home was different. It wasn't a retreat into silence. It was a journey toward a beginning. I carried him over the threshold of my small coastal house. "Welcome home, Maverick," I whispered. He jumped down and began his inspection. I watched as he explored the space I had only ever existed in. I heard the click of his nails on the old wood floors, a sound that broke the heavy silence that had owned this house for so long. He sniffed the leg of the worn armchair, his tail giving a tentative thump against the leather. He trotted to the sliding glass door that looked out onto the gray, churning ocean and pressed his wet nose against it, leaving a small smudge. And with every sniff, every thump of his tail, every new smudge on the glass, the house felt less like an empty shell and more like a home. It was no longer just my shelter. It was our territory. The nights changed most of all. Before Maverick, sleep was a battlefield. Now, it was a quiet harbor. I still woke up sometimes in the dead of night, the old anxieties stirring. But now, I would open my eyes and see his shape at the foot of my bed, a dark crescent in the moonlight. I'd hear the soft, rhythmic puff of his breath, a steady, living metronome. I would reach down and my fingers would find the warm, coarse fur of his back. That simple, solid presence was an anchor. It was real. It told me I was in my bed, in my house, by the sea in Oregon. I was not in the sand, not in the heat, not in the past. He was my anchor in the present. And with him there, the ghosts couldn't get a foothold. For the first time in years, I began to sleep through the night. Our story, in the way these things do in small towns, began to spread. People saw us on our morning walks along the misty beach. They saw Maverick, a confident, happy dog, chasing driftwood into the surf. And they saw the change in me. The slump in my shoulders was gone. I started looking up, not at the ground. Anna told the story at the clinic. The Millers told the story of the veteran who just couldn't let his dog go. One day, I took Maverick back to the clinic, not for a checkup, but to visit. I found myself talking to a new volunteer, telling him about the word I found scribbled on that piece of paper: useless. As I spoke, I watched Maverick walk over to a kennel holding a terrified, newly rescued dog. He didn't bark or crowd it. He just lay down a few feet away, a calm, steady presence. In that moment, I found a new mission. We started volunteering regularly. I would talk to people, sometimes other veterans, about how saving him had, in truth, saved me. Maverick, the dog someone had thrown away, became a silent ambassador of hope. He was living proof that no one is truly useless, and that the best way to heal your own wounds is to find the courage to care for someone else's. The most profound rescues are often the ones where we can't be sure who saved whom. A dog someone labeled useless gave a man his purpose back, reminding us that every soul has value and every heart has the capacity to heal. If their journey touched your heart, please help that hope travel further. Become part of our Voice of Pause family by subscribing and share what rescue has meant to you in the comments below. Your words and your choice to share this story could be the light that helps the next Maverick find their way home. The journey continues, and another story of hope is waiting for you right now on the screen.